we have these areas of our life where we have these different paths that we're going on, and some people choose one path and some people choose another path.
Mm-hmm. And these two paths, whether you're on these, we're on these, everybody's on these two
Everybody's
paths,
on them.
period.
Welcome to Wealth Untethered, your guide to the principles and mindset of a genuinely wealthy life. This podcast explores universal laws, principles, and strategies that lead to wealth and fulfillment. We delve into topics like investment, cash flow, business, estate and legacy planning, longevity, health, science, and more. All in an attempt to examine and challenge your mindset about what's possible for you. To learn more about Wealth Untethered, visit our website, wealthuntethered.com. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
So we lived in the same neighborhood for about 20 years. My kids were raised there. It's been awesome. It's in Salt Lake City, just right now, about 10 minutes outside of downtown. But it's unique, right? Because it's used to be the original Salt Lake City country club. So it has like winding streets and there's big trees and it's just an awesome, awesome neighborhood. We've loved living there. And so with that, we have some families, right, that we've become really close with. And my oldest daughter is graduating this year, and she has a best friend that just lives right down the street from us. And they, some of the parents put together this like highlight reel, and the highlight reel was like videos and pictures of them when they were little, and that happened this week. And something occurred to me is the earlier shots of them when this family first moved into the neighborhood. I wasn't there. I wasn't in those shots. There were some shots at Disneyland. There was some shots of road trips, pictures of birthday parties. It occurred to me I wasn't there.
You felt that in the moment.
Yeah, and a big thing for me is like I'm very conscious of the influence I have over my kids, and I like to say that I don't have regrets, but I do. And I think my biggest regret is the influence I could have had over my kids when they were younger. Because getting into their teenage years, they're less, the influence you have is kind of it's diminishing returns, right?
Yeah.
And it hurt, man. And I realized that during those days, that's when I faced my shit. That's when, I took over a business, I took over debt, I defaulted on the debt. It was a hard time, 2009, 2010, similar to, the time period of your story.
Yeah.
But here's the thing is I learned something about myself in those times. I learned that I could work 18 hours, 19 hours a day, every day. I could hustle, I could grind, and I had to dig myself out of a pretty deep hole. But I put my family on the altar of sacrifice in doing it.
Cost.
And so I look at, again, the perspective I have of wealth now, right? Wealth isn't just material. Wealth isn't, a bank account balance or equity in a business or cash flow from an investment. Wealth is extracting fulfillment out of every area of life in the moment. And the lessons I learned then, I've told my kids this. I'm very intentional about saying, like, this is what was going on. This is what was in my head. And you have
those conversations now.
Yeah, and the impact. I know I made an impact on you, but I want you to know, like, deep inside of me, I felt this stewardship to take care of my family, and I felt like that was taking care of you. And I came home and I was kind of an asshole. I was closed. Like, I was in warrior hunter mode for a couple of years, probably more than a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I wasn't present for my girls, right? And I wasn't connected to them. Even though I was present physically, I wasn't present emotionally, right, and psychologically. And the reason why I tell that story is because it's a lesson that I had to learn, and I keep learning so that I can realize like these are the things I care about. These are the things I want for myself in life, which is these feelings, these experiences. And I'm very clear about that now. I wasn't clear about that before, and I had to learn those lessons. And looking at, I would say from a practical standpoint of why I had to learn those lessons, it wasn't necessarily investment risk and investment loss. I didn't understand business. I didn't understand business agreements. I didn't understand business partnerships. I also didn't understand what you put on the line when you assume debt. When you state in a contract, I promise to pay this, and if I don't, this is what happens.
Yeah.
It was real estate debt. It was unsecured debt. I learned a lot during that period of time, but I also learned a lot about business agreements, business arrangements, business dissolution, and also asset protection. There's a lot of components that came from that I now apply to other, to clients' lives.
Yes.
And I did it early on as well. And so that's where I look at, again, we talked about protection quite a bit on the last episode, and protection has so many different forms. But ultimately, what are we protecting? We're protecting our mindset. We're protecting, okay, this is the best way for me. This is my best self to life. Courage, conviction, confidence, maximizing that, I would say, requires a very solid foundation. Right.
100%.
So for me, I didn't have that. And when business went sideways, I did not show up to life in the way that I could have. And now, as far as like understanding business, agreements, partnerships, contracts, debt, I'm very clear, right, about how to protect myself for worst case scenario so that I minimize my potential values that will be inevitable in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Patrick. I know, you touched on that earlier with me and the emotion. And I shared my story in the last episode of not being there in 08, 09, 2010 mentally. And I don't remember much of my kids' lives, if any, during those years. And I want to point out for you and I, for everyone else out there, like in the past, I would allow myself to feel those emotions, and I'd beat the shit out of myself. I'd just pound myself in the ground over feeling that. And that pounding myself in the ground, although has some utility, but it lost its utility when I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And I didn't get clear about the lesson, apply it in my life, and then to take that lesson to another level, share it with other people, which I do today. And so I want everybody to hear that from us and know, especially from my own experience, that I used to beat the shit out of myself. And I'm still to this day, I'm the hardest on myself. And I'm learning. And in that learning, I celebrate and appreciate along the way. And I'm so glad that you're where you're at in your life. Mm-hmm. You've been a massive influence on my life. You'll continue to be a massive influence on my life, my family's life. And so I appreciate that, man. Thank you for sharing that. I hope that all of you are taking this into your own life and you're asking yourselves questions about your own life, about what's working, what's not working. And then at the end of the day, yeah, a little bit of a pounding I think can be helpful and useful, but don't keep the pounding going. Mm-mm. It was a mistake.
You got to contextualize.
You learn from it.
You got to create context around why we make mistakes. You got to create context around why there's failure, why we feel certain ways, right? Again, there's polarity in all aspects of life, but the polarity of sadness, of depression, of anxiety, I would go borderline shame, right? Which is like, how could I do this? Yeah. How could I put my family in this situation? How could I not be there? I feel when we have those feelings, we don't want them, but they exist for a reason. And I feel it's to show us the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Where when we are present, okay, when we are enjoying, when we're bringing that best part of us to the different experiences and roles in life, man, we appreciate it, we feel it, and we want it even more. So I feel, again, going to the analogy that we had with roots of a tree and the trunk and branches, those are the emotions, the experience that dig our roots in deeper and
Definitely.
deeper and allow us
Creates
to
that polarity.
experience the other side of the spectrum. I think both are required, and often you find some symmetry between the two sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I say that because creating context around what happens to you, I feel will always put you in the position of blaming yourself, self-deprecation. It doesn't put you in a good state. But when you frame it and contextualize it and it happened for me, that is when you say, okay, how can I take this and, like you love to say, apply it?
Yeah.
And the application isn't just for you. I look at, again, the infinite fulfillment in life comes from taking who you are, your experiences, the value that you are, and bringing that to the world. And there's obviously not infinite people in the world, but there's billions.
Yeah.
You have essentially infinite opportunities to create value and take the experience of your life and make others' lives better because of it, and it'll reciprocate.
Yep. Well said. Well said. So today's topic is that of parallel paths.
Yep.
And this was introduced to me around the same time that was introduced to you, that we have these areas of our life where we have these different paths that we're going on, and some people choose one path and some people choose another path.
Mm-hmm. And these two paths, whether you're on these, we're on these, everybody's on these two
Everybody's
paths,
on them.
period, right?
Yep.
And parallel paths was developed by a financial advisor that we have deep respect for.
Yeah.
He's a veteran of industry, Vince Dodona, incredible man. But he created this because of the experiences he saw over and over and over and over again with all different investment types, portfolio allocations, family situations, wealthy, poor. He's seen everything, probably a lot more than we've seen.
Yeah.
And he created this to really create context around how we could carry out the optimization of wealth, right? So the two parallel paths are the protection path and the wealth accumulation path, or the wealth path. Everybody's on them, right? Now, the two paths must exist, and we've really talked about it already, because wealth doesn't just materialize overnight, right? You don't just like, hey, I'm going to set up an investment account and suddenly have $1 million in there, right? If that's your target, right? If that's what you're after trying to achieve, okay, wealth kind of goes through peaks and valleys and accumulates, and ultimately you keep contributing money to it and have that target wealth in the end.
Yeah.
But that along the way, there's a lot of things that can happen in life, right? There's so much disruption that we are susceptible really daily, right? And some things we have control over, some things we don't have control over, but we do have control over the strength and stability of that path, right? Because you and I, man, we've been fortunate to work with hundreds of clients. Personally, my firm, we've worked with thousands of clients. And you see patterns, right? But you also see one of the patterns, which is one day you can be insanely healthy. The next day you can be on a bike ride and collapse because of a heart attack. Okay, you can be sued. You could have marital issues. You can have kid issues. Okay, you could also have accidents. Okay, you could have lawsuits. There's so many different elements of life that we're an environment that has risk, and so being on that protection path ensures that we minimize disruption so that the wealth path, the wealth accumulation path, can materialize with the highest degree of certainty possible.
Definitely. Well, I've certainly interrupted my wealth creation path with things in my life, and risk has been the biggest one for me that actually stopped the path. Now, thank goodness I was able to extract lessons, apply them, and get back on the path and actually accelerate it as a result of that commitment. But yeah, I've felt that firsthand, taking excessive amounts of risk in areas where I took cash. I relinquished control of my cash. I didn't have much knowledge. I had no expertise. I had no purpose and passion in that area. I didn't have control. And so the main aspects of it is I took cash. I gave up control of that cash. I didn't have any knowledge or expertise in that area where that cash was, and I was gambling. And that gamble I lost, and that gamble interrupted my wealth creation path in a massive way.
Yeah, looking at, again, the relinquishing of control with wealth, I feel even with the most certain vehicles, there are degrees of relinquishing control. So we're not talking absolutes here.
Yeah.
We're talking about finding ways, right, to minimize disruption and ensure certainty. Right now, I feel the financial services industry, and I understand why financial advisors give the advice that they give, right? I got a certification recently as an investment fiduciary because we have a investment advisory. I had to take courses and training to pass a test and get a certification, okay, that revolved around risk, where you have to take risk to get a return. Okay, so that's the context in which financial advisors are getting trained, and that training leads to how they look at a person's finances, and how they look at a person's finances results in the advice that they give. Okay, which is you have to take risk in order to get a return.
Yeah.
And all the risk is usually outside of you.
Yeah.
It's relinquishing that control to someone else, and they take their stewardship and get a return for you.
Yeah.
So this is where, again, parallel paths ensures that, okay, whatever your wealth accumulation strategy is, okay, you also have a path that goes right alongside it, okay, that protects from disruption. Because like we said, you're gonna have financial vehicles. It could be a bank account, right? It could be an insurance policy. It could be an investment. It could be your business. It could be personal development. Okay, whatever your strategy is, there is going to be elements that are outside your control that can disrupt that, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is to have those paths in as much synchronicity as possible.
Well
But
said.
then getting into the wealth, accumulation side of things, okay, that we're going to probably talk about that in the next episode. But the idea is very similar, which is it's not taking on the mindset, right, of I'm going to relinquish and control, and if I lose money, that's just risk, right? I had to take risk to get a return, and I mean, there's a lot of paradox and contradiction in just risk return. Okay, but the idea that we're going to get into in the next episode is really how do you get the optimal wealth maximization, optimal wealth creation, optimal targets with the least amount of risk or the highest degree of certainty.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what we shared in the last episode and what I've lived through myself when it comes to wealth creation, when it comes to protection in all areas of my life, again, my property value assets, my human life value assets. And in this episode, and you just stated it, but it's being clear that we have these two paths and we're on both of them, but how far are those two paths synced together? There's the protection path and there's the wealth creation path, and how well are those paths synced together? And I love this. I wrote this down for our episode, and Vince shared this in here with us in this parallel path. Would you want 100% probability of getting 95%, so 100% chance, like you're certain that you're going to get to 95% of your wealth target, rather than the possibility, not the certainty, the possibility of getting 100% and the likelihood to significantly less, maybe even 50% less of your actual target?
Yep.
And when I ask clients that, when you frame it up and you help them see the reality of where they're at, what's going on out there today with people in big financial institutions and their agenda, they want the 100% probability of getting to 95%.
Because it just takes it just takes one thing. One thing to crash the house of cards with a typical financial plan.
Yes.
One thing.
One thing.
And for me, I'm like, there's 50 things that that could crash your house of cards, but just one of those things, but that you could protect, right? That you can ensure that goes right alongside your wealth strategy. Okay. But it's it's the risk reward. Financial services industry, right, is just continually conditioning financial advisors to provide product and strategy in a way that does not take into consideration any of those risks. So anyway, we're going to get into a lot more of that. But the idea of us bringing up parallel paths is everybody has a different situation. You have a different profession. You have a different income level. You live in a different state with different taxation. You may be married, maybe not married. You may have kids, not kids. You may be empty nester. You have equity in your house, no equity. It's one of those things. Everybody is in a different situation. And so as advisors, right, when we meet with clients, we help them see the two parallel paths that they're on.
Number one, recognize them.
Yep.
Yep.
Then we say, this is your wealth accumulation path. Okay. This is your protection path. And that's where we really start, is to ensure that, okay, whatever path you're on from a wealth accumulation standpoint, how do we ensure that you get to the highest target wealth possible, right? And
with the most amount of probability
and
and
mitigate and mitigate all of the potential disruptions that could occur in life.
Yeah, to take you off of that path, or in my case, completely eliminate the path and have to start over. Yeah, and it's one of the toughest thing, one of the most challenging things that I've ever had to do, and that's to start over financially. Build things up,
you
have
lost
it
momentum.
burn to the ground.
Momentum stopped, right? And if momentum stops, you got to start all the energy that's required. Whereas
to get that momentum going again,
and most people don't.
Yeah.
Right. And this, the idea of like minimizing valleys, right, is you may lose some momentum. You don't lose all of it.
Yeah.
And so going from you're 100 miles an hour to 0, rather than going 100 miles an hour to 90 or 80. Okay, it's a lot easier to get up to 100 from 80 than it is from 0.
Yeah, I agree. So I hope that you guys are asking yourself this question of, well, I wonder where I'm at on those paths. Where am I at on the protection path? Where am I at on the wealth accumulation path? And where in my own life are these two paths coming together? Where are they coming? Are they parallel with each other, or is one way off here and one's way off there? Do you know this? And because again, and you're going to hear us say this over and over and over and over and over, it's in the knowing versus hoping. I like to know. I like to leverage knowing versus hoping. And this is an area where you can know. You can know exactly what protection path you're on. You can know exactly what wealth creation path you're on. And you can see if those paths are parallel with each other or if they're not. Is there something in your life that could totally wipe out your wealth creation path in your life?
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this episode. We'll be back on the next episode talking about wealth and wealth strategy, wealth creation. So make sure you tune in. Thanks for the support.
And Patrick, I do also want to mention that you can go to wealthuntethered.com and take the assessment. We're going to have it up at Wealth Untethered. And in that assessment, I didn't mention this when I was talking about the two parallel paths, but you can go to wealthuntethered.com and take the assessment to see what path you're on and take a deeper dive to assist you with that.
Awesome. All right. See you next time, everyone. Thank you.